Greetings, you're on our podcast series and now we are going to talk about Turkey, its geopolitics and its influence in the Middle East and Europe. I hope my voice is not too dramatic as we're not going to read poems here, however, to outline the main topics, I shall start with the literature. While preparing this podcast, I accidentally recalled the book of American political scientist George Friedman, named The Next 100 Years. This book was written in 2009. It's quite an interesting study to read. There, George Friedman managed to predict the major tendencies of the 2020s. Although the author goes even further, thinking about the world in the future decades, about the Third World War and its consequences. In today's video, I'd like to start not with the answer, but with the question. How do you imagine the world in the 2060s? Will it be with or without the United States? How Europe will change and what will be the role of China? If you have some spare time before going to sleep, you definitely have what to think about. In the book The Next 100 Years, Friedman suggests that Turkey will become the leader of the whole Islamic world and eventually challenge United States hegemony. This is supposed to happen in the 2060s. Will it be so? We cannot say for sure. However, Ankara now is an active player on the international stage. Erdogan criticized the West for being too passive from Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, but at the same time, Turkey remained the country that maintains political and economic ties with Russia. What game is Erdogan really playing and can he win it? Let's find it out in our today's podcast. Turkey bets on both East and West, and at the same time, in both cases, it managed to win. Maneuvering seems to be the best policy. You can cooperate with both sides and gain preferences from both of them as well. But it's not that simple. If you go wrong, you run the risk of being drawn into a conflict between two opposing powers, or becoming, for instance, overly dependent on one of them, as it is with Belarus. Why is then Turkey taking such risks? A big country means big interests. Ankara's appetite for power is not limited to one region. Let's take also the Middle East. The Syrian conflict is raging near Turkey's southern borders, where Erdogan is actively involved. Perhaps his main interest is the suppression of the Kurdish National Liberation Movement. The Kurds are the largest people without a state and the second national group in Turkey. Moreover, their population is spread across 4 countries: Iran, Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. That's why, for instance, their independence in Syria will lead to growing separatism within Turkey. At the same time, the groups of the Kurds, some of them are supported by the West. Therefore, in the Middle East, Ankara sometimes cooperates with Moscow. However, it does not always listen to its words. Despite Russia's concerns, Turkey has announced a military operation in Syria in June 2022 to create a so-called security zone apparently against Kurdish formations. Turkey's great influence in the Middle East makes it an extremely important player not to quarrel with. It is Ankara that bears the brunt of the influx of refugees from Syria and other affected countries in the region. Erdogan is actually using this argument to put pressure on European countries. Where would migrants go if not to Turkey? To Europe. Now let's take a closer look at Turkey's role in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Erdogan has repeatedly supported Ukraine militarily, showing solidarity with the West. But at the same time, helping Russian businesses that were targeted by sanctions. And it's not just because Ankara is mediating between the sides and therefore trying to build bridges rather than burn them. Under the guise of peacemaker, Turkey has a rather pragmatic policy. Throughout history, Russia was the enemy of the Ottoman Empire, and by helping Kiev, Ankara seeks to weaken the Kremlin's role in the region. It's far more advantageous to have a peace-loving democratic country near its borders than a giant, aggressive state which pretends to be a regional hegemon. Turkey has recently been relying more and more on the past in its policies. Westernization has been replaced by the policy named Neo-Ottomanism. It's a policy of traditional values, Islam, and the restoration of influence in the territory of the former Ottoman Empire, of which Turkey is the successor. The territory of Ukraine and Crimea, now occupied by Russia, was once part of the so-called Crimean Khanate, a vassal of the Ottoman Empire. Turkey therefore actively supports the Crimean Tatars, the peninsula indigenous population who endure repression from Moscow. Erdogan advocates the de-occupation of Crimea and its return to Ukraine. Central Asian countries is another theater of the Turkey politics. They used to be fully influenced by Moscow, but since the collapse of the USSR and the Crimean War in Ukraine, they have become increasingly estranged from Russia. At the same time, they share common religion and economic ties with Turkey. Central Asian countries are Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. For instance, there are also some developments in security cooperation between Tajikistan and Turkey. Significant development was the working visit of the Interior Minister of Tajikistan to Ankara in 2022. As a result, an agreement on cooperation against terrorism was signed. It seems to be not as major event and just a simple visit, but this visit shows us a tendency and the admiration of Turkey to reshape the politics of the whole Central Asian region. In 1992, the Turkish Cooperation and Development Agency was established. Ankara uses this institution to promote what in diplomacy is called soft power, creating a positive reputation for the state. The agency now organizes cultural, humanitarian, and economic projects from Pakistan to Africa, and in this way it promotes the name of the country and also the policy of the officials of this country. That's why we can say that some success in this sphere was achieved. So what do we have in conclusion? Turkey is at the crossroads between Europe, Middle East, Russia, NATO. However, it is able to navigate between different spheres of interest to pursue its own policies, without being part of someone else's project. And the competent combination of soft and hard power allows it to achieve the result with the least risks. Yes, it's pragmatic and largely a moral policy, but it is successful. Whether it's destined to change the world and redraw the map, we shall see. Dear listeners, if you like this podcast, you definitely know what to do. All your evaluations are highly incentivizing for us. Also, don't forget to support the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Let's keep in touch. See you next week.